I'd like to introduce Ronnie May, who will be presenting this section, which is titled Task Management and CCG.
Okay, well, thank you, Shandy. This is Ronnie. I will be going over lesson plan 16 and 17 and also giving you some information on a Client Conservation Gateway integration with CD. We'll start first with lesson plan 16, and that is submit a Client Conservation Financial Assistance request as an individual client. The requirements for this, for the participant, has an assigned individual CCG client ID, which will be provided for you. The rationale behind this is that clients may request financial assistance by submitting a NRCS CPA 1200 and Conservation Client Gateway. Once that request is submitted, clients can also view and track the request status in CCG. So the objectives for this lesson plan is at the end of the lesson plan, you'll be able to log into CCG as a client, submit a financial assistance request, and then view and track your request status as it goes along. So right now we're having Heather log into CCG. Okay, Heather is in CCG now, and she's got her client open. What we want to do now is we're going to click on the Apply for Conservation Program Financial Assistance icon at the top. And it's going to pull up to your preferences where you have your stuff selected for this individual. And now you want to identify an area by selecting a land unit on the map. If there wasn't a land unit on there, you could draw one in by hand. But luckily on this one, there was one already in there, so you want to make sure that you're in the right county and stuff. But after you determine that, you select that land unit as Heather's done, and then click the next button at the bottom. And this will bring us up to the next step, is where we want to select a conservation program that we want to apply for. So this would be, like a individual out there that was applying outside of the NRCS office. So she has selected the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. Once she's done that, then I've clicked Next. And once this gets pulled up, you can see that the person has an opportunity to either submit it online right now or to print it off and submit it later another way. So, but this one we're going to have them submit it right now. So we would go down then and actually do the basically put in the information for the conservation plan. For the application. So you go through there and answer the questions like farm records and all that. So, but for ease of, I guess, everything right now, we're going to just go ahead and go down to where we see the CPA 1200 and appendix. And you have to actually click on that blue button there to make the radio buttons hot at the bottom. And then once you've done that, you can just close out of that and click Yes. And once you've done that, you can click Next to go to the next screen. And once this pulls up, you basically want to confirm that you want your email communication done by that. If there's any comments that they would want to put in there, they could put those in. And once they've verified all that and put in their comments, then they can click Next. And this is where the individual would click on the yes, they want to sign it electronically. And normally this has been working, but as of this week, the e-sign line service is down, and so nobody can do this. And so that sort of, puts a hitch in this. But one nice thing about this is that they don't have to do it this way. They can also do it to where they upload a document, which would be the CPA 1200, into the system, and then that would also trigger the task in CD. So at this point, since we know that does not work, I'm going to have Heather go up here to the top right and click that X next to the save, and just click yes. So we don't want to just cancel out of it. Okay, so now we're back to the home screen here at CCG. And what we want to do now is to verify that this task was created. And normally we would, just see that automatically from when they electronically signed it. But since that did not work out, then I went ahead and uploaded one through the upload a document system. So there will be one in there. So what we want to do now is click on the icon that says Manage Account and View All Requests icon. Then as that pulls up, you'll be able to see that there's a document there. It says Document Submission. That's the one that I put in there yesterday. And so we want to click on the Actions. That's right. And then View Document Submission Request. And what this does is it gives us, it allows us to be able to see the document was submitted. Once it pulls up here. But we can see here on this screen where it gives you the request ID, which is something that you'll need to note. It also tells you how it was done with this document submission, or another way, it gives you the date and time it was submitted. It also tells you what it was submitted by, and then it tells you, what it was. So as you can see here, now this is pulled up. It shows that there's an application submitted. Tells you when and participant signed, all that information there. So what you can do now is you can select the Documents tab, which would be basically the title here. If you want to, then you could view the download. That's, if you need to do that. One other thing too that we can do is click the History tab, which is right next to the Documents tab there. And this is a new tab, and this is where the client will be able to actually monitor their application status as it goes through the system. So you can see now the date and time it was submitted, the description of it, and then who it was submitted by. And now at this point, we've been able to see that the document was submitted. So we will log out of CCG. And now we will log back in for Lesson Plan 17 in CD. As we learned in some of the previous lesson plans that we've just been through, we can assign tasks to ourselves or to other people, and so this is going to be a way that we can assign that new application task and be able to work through the process with that. Okay, and Heather is logged in, so I'll start Lesson Plan 17. It's self-assign new application task, an individual or entity 1200 FA application request. Requirements basically is that you had to be able to complete the previous lesson plan, which was submit a FA application through CCG. The rationale, clients can request financial assistance by submitting a 1200 application and Client Conservation Gateway. When a client submits a request, a new application task is created in Conservation Desktop. The task status is updated when the task is assigned or someone starts working on the task. The objectives that you'll be able to do at the end of this lesson plan. Well, you'll log into CD and assign the new task application and view and track the status of that task. So Heather's already logged in to Client Conservation Gateway as herself, and we'll make sure now that we have the same user preferences that the client used to sign in on. So we would check our preferences to make sure that we are there in Ringgold County, Iowa, Mount Ayr. So we've got that selected, so we know that's good. From there, we would select the task list. In the task list, when it comes up, we will select Available to Me. Okay, and we can see that has pulled up all the tasks. We can see there's a new application task there for Bobby J. Nelson, and so we don't have to do any searching or anything to find that. But if you did, you could select on either the task filter or the client if you know that client's name. You'll want to click the Action button, and there's client is showing you, or Heather is showing you how to do that. At the right, you'll click the Action button and select View Details for this task. And you can see this new application, and there's no owner at this point. You can see who has submitted it, where they're from, and also you can see again at the right, there in the middle of the CCG request ID. Okay, so we've been able to see all that. So now we will select the Task Actions button there in the middle, and we will go ahead and do a self-assign or assign it to ourselves. When we do that, one thing I want us to note is up here at the top, when it gives us the task details, the status now is in progress. The owner is Heather Henson, and so it is assigned that to us. And if we go down to the bottom of this, we can see there's a task log. And if we'll click on the History tab, and now it shows this. Basically, this is where they can view the history of a task and what's happening. It can show that it's assigned and who it's assigned to, and it also shows status changes. Okay, now we'll go back up to the main toolbar and click on the Conservation Client Gateway icon. And this is another way that we can search for a client and a request ID if for some reason we didn't have the information handy for us. On the client ID, you would type in the name of the client. This one, I believe we can type in Nelson, and it should pull up Bobby for us. You can see it pulled it up, so you just select that person. On the request type, you could put that in there if you knew it, but you might not know what the request type is, so you're welcome to leave it blank too. This is where you would need to know that request ID, and the one that, okay, and type that in and then click Search Request. And as you can tell, it pulled up the request, and you click on the request name there, and it should bring that request up. Okay, now we can see the document submission request details. And again, this is just another way that you can view it. It shows that who it was submitted by, the contact employee, and then you can also view the history tab, the document history tabs, to show the status and the progress of this application. You can see there it was submitted by, request is in process now by Heather. So this tab will update as the request is moved through the system. Okay, now we can log out of Client Conservation Gateway. And we can also log out of CD. Okay, Okay, and at this point, I'll ask Heather if she can to pull up the PowerPoint presentation that we have developed. And what this is here for is to show you and to be able to explain to you sort of the integration of how Client Conservation Gateway and CD is working together now. So basically, in this build, there is enhancements made to Client Conservation Gateway and CD task management integration, which now allows an individual or a business entity to track and view the status of the life cycle of their 1200 financial assistance application. Now, one thing to remember is this is just for this NRCS CPA 1200 only request. So this isn't for the other requests like that they might have out there. So what happens is that when there are changes to the application, the status will be updated in CCG, and these are the exact status changes that we will be able to see as a client. The application is in progress. Basically, that's what we just did, where the application moved from new to in process, and that would change to basically a pending status to show that the task is assigned and work is started. Then also, when the application is determined to be eligible, that will also change the status. If you undo the application status, that will also bring it back to pending and show and present to the client that that has changed. The application also, if it's determined to be ineligible, that will also show a change. And if the application is canceled per a client request, that will also show a change. And then also, if we do, if the client or us does a service center office change, that will also show up in the client's request status. So next slide, please. And as you noticed before, it's the history tab that is showing them, I guess, the status of their actions with the FA request. So that's the thing that they can look at and notice the change. The request status updates and request details, and also it'll show, just before it would just show submitted, but now it shows in progress or something along those lines. And then one other new thing that we've developed with this is that emails are sent to the client, whether it's an email for an individual or whether it's been submitted for by a business entity. Those emails will be sent to notify them of the changes of their application. So the emails are sent when the change is for a pending, eligible, ineligible, canceled. Those are the ones that they get an email on. The one that they do not get an email on is if the service center office has changed. So next status, please. Next slide, please. So as they go in, and as we've just done, where we've assigned the application to be worked on, you can tell that now it's assigned to me, and you will be able to view that task as a new application. So next slide, please. Once you do that, you can go into, you'll be directed into ProTrax, where you can actually enter in that new application, just as you've done before. So next slide, please. And then once you've completed that, another task will be assigned to you. It'll be called Determine Application Eligibility. So you'll click on that and start the process of doing that particular one, and you'll do that just like you've done before in ProTrax, where you can make it eligible and then save it. So it would go from pending to eligible. And then this is another tab on the task list where you can see completed by. As you can tell, we've completed the new application now and also determine application eligibility. So next slide, please. And this is how you'll be able to view your the CCG client request details in CD. So there are two different options to do this. One is to search by client ID and request ID when a client's not in the CD table of contents. And that's what we just did back in the previous lesson plan, where you actually could see where we typed in the client's last name, clicked on that, and we also typed in the request ID, and we're able to pull it up that way. Another option is to view the client record when the client is in the CD table of contents, and that's where you would use the client conservation icon at the top. In option one, you can see we're doing the same thing that we did before. It would give you the client request, and then you could go to the right to the actions icon and click on the financial assistance request, and it will pull up and give you the history or status of your application. So next slide, please. And this is just a screenshot of that particular one where you can show that now it's been completed. You can see the history of it to where what's been done and who's done it at the right. So that's, that's all a good thing. Next slide, please. And then this is the second option where the client's already in context over here, and you can click on the Client Conservation Gateway icon at the top, and it will pull you up to that request as we just seen before. So next slide, please. And you would do the same thing where you select the financial assistance request details, and it will provide you with the same documentation that we saw earlier. You can see that it's been completed. You can see that the application now is determined eligible, and you can see this is all located underneath the History tab. So next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, this is the email that will be sent now that your application has been determined eligible. And this would be sent to the individual client if it was done that way. If it was done through a business, it would be sent to the business email address and also CC to the individual client that submitted it on behalf of the business. So next slide, please. And now as we go to undo application status, so you've gone before you made it eligible, and for some reason now you determine that you want to make it, that you want to undo that status. The client's in table of contents, you would go to the application number and select that, and then below that you would get an option to select Manage Applications. At that point, you'd be able to go to ProTrax and undo the status just like we normally would. So next slide, please. As you can see, this would be, as you undo that status, the client gets or can view it in the History tab where it shows now it's back in process, and it basically shows them that something has changed there, and the application status is now pending. Next slide, please. And then they'll also get an email, just like in the previous one, but this time instead of saying eligible, it would say pending. And this could be done both individuals and through the business. Next slide, please. And this is where if you needed to go back in and determine that the application was ineligible. So you would do like you did before, go to that contract number in the table of contents, go to Manage Applications, and that would bring you back to ProTrax, and you could select from the drop-down, you could select ineligible. And then you would also need to upload or do the managed letters and upload that to DMS. So next slide, please. And as you do that, that's going to change the status in CD, and you can tell that it's gone now from pending to ineligible application, and status is complete. So next slide, please. And the client would also get an email stating that the request status is now resolved and eligible, and it would also show up in the History tab as they look on that as an ineligible application. Next slide, please. And then also you would be able to, in CD under Documents, you could get to that ineligible application letter that you created, and you could print that out and mail it to them as you. Next slide, please. And then also they would receive an email stating that their application is currently ineligible, and that a copy of that letter will be sent to them, certified mail. So next slide, please. All right, and if you get a request from an individual to cancel their application, you would go back in there in CD to the application number, go to Manage Applications, and come back into ProTrax, and you could cancel the application and click Save. Next application, please. And you can tell here that it updates where the application now is canceled. And you can see in history it also shows that. Next slide, please. And you can see it also sends them a letter that's stating that their application is now canceled. And this is when you want to go in and do a Service Center office change for an application. You go into ProTrax and you'd go to the Service Center office and make that change to where they wanted to change it to and click Save. And one thing that's, I guess, not necessarily unique about this one is that they can still see it, in there. It basically says the Service Center office update, and you can tell the Service Center office at the far right up there has been changed to the one that they've selected, but also there's no email sent on this update. And I believe that's it. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to put them on the Q&A pod, and we'll address them as soon as we can. But that's all that I have for CCG and the integration with CD. So I'll turn it back over to Shandy.
Thank you, Ronnie. There are a couple of questions that I think we can cover quick before we move on. So the question is, can clients opt out of receiving emails from CCG for application status changes?
I am not aware that they can at this time.
Okay, fair enough. When a task is complete, example in ProTrax, does the CD user have to manually change the status of the task? And maybe that's more for Heather.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
So the question was, when a task is complete, for example, in ProTrax, does the CD user have to manually change the status of the task?
It just depends on if that task is a manual complete or an autocomplete. If you remember in 1.1, rank application was the only one that was a manual complete. In 1.2, there are more that are manual complete. So it just depends on how that task is closed. And you can look at the task guide to determine which tasks are manual complete or autocomplete.
Perfect.